All right. I'm going to take my mask off so you guys can better hear. There's nobody else in this room, I promise. That way you can see my lovely face here. Okay, so welcome everybody to my webinar about rethinking the way you train your core. I will be giving this presentation, obviously, but we also have my coworker, Joanna Diamond, with us today to help answer any questions that you guys may have in the chat feature in Zoom. You'll all be on mute during this presentation, but at any point you can reach out to Joanna in the chat. If you're familiar with the Zoom, you can even ask the questions privately or the whole group as a whole. It doesn't matter to me. No questions are dumb questions. Anyways, I decided to make this PowerPoint for a few different reasons. First of all, I think that there's a lot of misinformation on the internet about how to train your core. I find a lot of people have never really been introduced to proper core training. On top of that, today's society focuses just too much on aesthetics, which leads to a lot of faulty training mechanics. When we focus on how we look and not how we feel and move, things can go wrong. That doesn't mean we can't focus on getting those washboard abs that we've always dreamed of, all of us. It just means that we need to change the way that we go about getting them. So without further ado, let's get to it. So there's a lot of information I'm going to provide today, so please don't worry if you do not grasp onto every single point or have trouble understanding everything perfectly. That's really not my main goal here. My main goal, without a doubt, is to challenge the way that you view what the core actually is, and introduce a few ways about going about training the core. I'll be trying to give you as much information as possible within this 1 hour. If you feel like you missed something or need to revisit anything, both the PowerPoint and this entire webinar video will be posted online after we're done. Also, if you have any questions or the PowerPoint, again, Joanna, who's a great physical therapist herself, is right here in the chat to help. This PowerPoint is designed for a widespread audience. Core training is extremely important to those that have low back pain, obviously. But as you will learn, it's important in many other areas of the body as well. Beyond those that are in pain, though, core training is also important for injury prevention, so you're not in pain in the first place, as well as athletic performance. They go hand in hand. So here's a breakdown of the presentation so you all know what to expect. For the first half of the presentation, we're going to be doing an educational workshop, which will consist mostly of information about what the core is and how it functions. For the second half of the presentation, we're going to talk about how to actually train the core and get to some exercise demonstration and examples of things that you could do on your own. So, what actually is the core? Well, that is a loaded question, my friends. Truly, it depends on who you ask. The definition of the core can vary depending on the physical therapist or the fitness professional that you speak with. Many layman individuals think the core is just the abdominal muscles or even the six-pack muscles. However, I'm here to tell you today that it's much more than that. For starters, the core includes not only muscles on the front, but also the back of the trunk. In my opinion, the core encapsulates most muscles that are on what's known as the axial skeleton. That essentially just means from the top of the rib cage down to the bottom of the pelvis, as you can see in these photos. In other words, the core includes most muscles that attach directly to your spine, your pelvis, your rib cage, or your shoulder blades. Why, you might ask? Well, let's get to it. Let's explain that a little bit further here. But before we start to think about the individual muscles that make up the core, I challenge you to think about how the core is supposed to function as a unit instead. If you were to take this approach, you'll begin to understand why I believe there's many more muscles that function as part of the core than you may think. The two main roles of the core are this. The first is to provide a stable base for your limbs to use to move freely. We can use an analogy of building a house to help understand this. You wouldn't want to build a house on stilts, like the house in the picture to the right. as it would be susceptible to bad weather knocking it over. Instead, it would be safest to use a strong concrete drilled base deep in the ground to make sure that your house is safe and stable, right? The second role of the core is to connect your upper and your lower body. An example to help understand this is shoveling snow. I'm talking like classic Chicago, heavy, gross, soggy snow. If you're not trying to throw out your back, we all know you need to squat down real nice to get a shovel full of snow, then stand up real quickly, using the momentum from your legs to then drive your arms forward, right, to toss the snow off the driveway. Your core is the one responsible for transferring that energy efficiently from your legs to your arms to make that happen. Give me a sec here. So the kinetic chain. Now that we have an introduction to the basic roles of the core, we can now transition to the idea of the kinetic chain. The kinetic chain helps us further understand the function of the core and how it's integrated with the rest of the body. It also helps us better understand why those with a weak core can experience pain in other areas of the body. So turn your attention to the picture to the right of this skeleton. The picture helps illustrate that the links within our kinetic chain are just the different joints throughout the body. If we look at the links from the bottom all the way up to the top, you'll see that the ankles, the knees, the hips, low back, mid back or thoracic spine, the shoulders, and then the neck. As you can see from the caption under each link to the right of the skeleton, each serves a specific role of either stability or mobility. When each link is doing its job perfectly and all working together in tandem, it helps produce healthy and pain-free movement. However, when one of those links is not doing its job, others nearby try to compensate to pick up the slack from their dysfunctional neighbors. This is why we don't like compensations. Compensations over time lead to pain and injury. The most important part of the entire kinetic chain is the lumbar spine, which is the center of the body, and it's involved in nearly all movement. So when it's not doing its job, it has the ability to affect joints or chain links all over the body. This is an extremely important concept to understand because when we train our core, we should be doing it so in a way that prioritizes training its role in stability. Think of core stability in an analogy like this. Take a look at the photo on the top right-hand corner of the slide. If you were to try to jump as far as you can off 2 feet on concrete, you would get... All right, guys, sorry about that technical difficulty here. I don't know, our Wi-Fi must have gone out or something of that nature. Let me get this back to where it needs to be. Okay, so let's pick up where we started here, which was applying the concept that we just talked about core stability. So let's apply that through a common activity that many people partake in, which is running. Take a look at the runner in the lower right-hand corner of the picture, or the slide. This runner, overarching their lower back, is equivalent to the kid in the picture above trying to jump off a wobbly canoe. In this example, the wobbly canoe is equivalent to the runner's wobbly and weak core. When this runner is extending their leg behind them to propel their body forward, their leg doesn't have a stable core to push from, right? This results in the canoe, or in this case, her unstable core, to slide into excessive extension or overarching the lower back like seen in the picture. This decreases the runner's ability to use the energy from her legs to drive her body forward, similar to how the kid is using all the energy from his legs to only jump a mere foot or so, small distance off the boat, right? Hopefully these analogies that I'm providing about core stability are starting to make a little bit of sense. These analogies help provide reason for why we need to train our core to be as stable as possible. All right. So now that we have talked about the function of the core, we can finally circle back to discussing the individual muscles that make up the core. I tend to group the muscles of the core together as layers, as Shrek is talking about over here, in which each layer has a common goal rather than looking at all of them individually. As a rule of thumb, the deeper the layer in the core, the more important the layer. I don't want to spend too much time on this, as I would assume most of you are not anatomy nerds like myself. However, I do think it's important for you to have a basic understanding of what muscles are part of the core. Like I said before, if you don't catch every detail, it's totally okay. My goal is to simply open your eyes that training your core involves much more than developing just the six-pack core abs. So when looking at the core, I tend to break it into 4 different layers. I couldn't come up with any cooler names, so bear with me here. These layers include the most deep layer, the less deep layer, the lower body secondary, and upper body secondary. As usual, the bigger sections on the pyramid have more importance, meaning the most deep core layer is the most important for stability, and then so on and so forth as you go up. So first, we'll start with the deepest layer of the core. Because it is the deepest layer, it directly attaches to the lumbar spine, the pelvis, and the rib cage. This gives this group of muscles more importance for stability because they get first priority on our skeleton. As shown on the slide, it includes 4 muscles. Think of these muscles all coming together to form a can of soda. The front and sides of the can are all made up of what's known as the transversus abdominis, as seen as the large fan muscle in the picture to the right. If you have ever taken a yoga class, you most likely have heard someone say, draw your belly button in towards your spine. Well, this is the muscle that's directly responsible for that action. It acts to cinch in your stomach, which after quarantine, I think we could all use a little bit. The back of the soda can is made up of what's known as the multifidus, as seen in the picture as well. It just helps prevent any excess movement of the lower back from the posterior end or the backside. The bottom of the can is made up of the pelvic floor. The pelvic floor helps stabilize your pelvis and also gives your organs a nice comfy bed to lay on. Finally, the top of the can of soda is made from the diaphragm, which is actually our primary breathing muscle. The common function or common goal of all 4 of these muscles is to stabilize the low back, the pelvis, and the rib cage. So when all 4 of these muscles are working together, they push inwards towards the center of your stomach, kind of as displayed in this picture in the top right. What this does is it creates pressure inside your abdomen. You can kind of think of it like this. When all 4 of these muscles are working together, it creates stiffness like an unopened can of soda pop. If they're not working together, it's like an empty can of soda pop that easily can be crushed. I know everyone's probably at one point in their life stood on both a full can of soda and also an empty can of soda, and you could tell the difference. When you have pressure inside, it gives it stability and strength. So, moving on, the next layer of the core is what's known as the less deep layer. Super creative names, I know. I struggled with this. Anyways, this layer doesn't have a cool analogy like the last. You might have heard these muscles before as their household names in the fitness community. On the sides, we have the obliques. The obliques are responsible for not only stability, but they help rotate and side bend your trunk. The rectus abdominis is a muscle in the front, which gives us the highly touted 6-pack look. These muscles are responsible for flexing your core, or the motion performed when doing crunches or sit-ups, things of that nature. Finally, we have the erector spinae, which are muscles that run along the sides of your spine and help you stay upright and extended. In terms of function, these muscles help produce movement in your trunk. However, they also contribute to stability of your trunk, or preventing movement like we were talking about in the last slide, especially when doing higher level activities that require a little bit more strength to perform, such as lifting something, sporting activities, etc. Okay. Sorry, I was just checking a text message from another coworker. These next two core layers include muscles that are not often considered as part of the core. Because they are not part of the midsection, or they're not part of the midsection, so often they're just not considered part of the core. However, these muscles play a large role in the stability of the body. Think of them as secondary core muscles because they help support the role of your abdominal muscles. You can also think of them as the core of the legs because they dictate the stability of our entire lower extremities. First, we'll start with the gluteus medius. This muscle is on the outside of the hip, as you can see in the picture, and is responsible for keeping our pelvis upright when we stand on one leg. If this muscle is not strong enough, it will cause the pelvis to tilt and the spine to curve. You could take a look at the two images on the top right corner. In this image, the runner's left glute medius, as pointed out by the giant red arrow, is not strong enough. As a result, you could see his pelvis is sagging to the side and his spine falls out of alignment. Long story short, it ain't what you want to happen. Next, we have the glute max muscle, which is the big booty muscle in the back. It's the biggest and most powerful muscle in the body. It helps stabilize the pelvis and also helps extend our hip behind us. Lastly, we have the piriformis, which is the cute little muscle that hides underneath the rest. This muscle helps rotation of our lower leg and prevents our knees from caving inwards in activities like going up and down stairs, squatting, of that nature. All right. The last core muscle layer that we'll talk about is the upper body accessory core muscles. Similar to the lower body accessory muscles that we just talked about, these muscles make up the core of your shoulders. They help provide a stable base for your shoulders to move from, but also contribute to the stability of your spine. Let's first take a look at the latissimus dorsi. This is the big fan muscle on the side of the body seen in the picture to the right. It's the muscle that makes buff dudes have super wide backs, giving them that V-taper look. This muscle's primary action is to move the arm, but as you can see, if you take a look at the picture on the right, it attaches on the entire bottom half of the spine and the pelvis, which allows it to provide stability at the center of our body as well. Next, we have the lower trapezius, which is the bottom portion of the trap muscle shown in the picture to the right. This muscle helps stabilize the shoulder blade on the body, but also helps promote upright posture from preventing us from slouching forward. It helps pull us back up like this. Lastly, we have the serratus anterior muscle, which is the muscle in the picture to the left, which helps stabilize your shoulder when doing things like push-ups or lifting your arm overhead. All right, so I know that was a lot. You definitely don't need to follow everything there, but like I said, you can always return to the PowerPoint and the webinar itself. You'll have a copy of the video sent to you after this if you ever need to review anything. But it's not essential for you to understand every single one of those muscles, so don't get any stress about that. All right, so we made it through the boring part. I hope you're all still with me and still awake. Let's now address how we actually go about training the core. Some key points to remember when choosing exercises are this. First and foremost, you want to train the core to be stable. I've said that probably 100 times. When possible, train groups of muscles together rather than the individual muscles themselves. Next, do not forget to train single arm or single leg movements because they actually require a little bit more work from your core. So like if you're doing a dumbbell bench press or something, try doing it with one arm and you'll notice that your core will get lit up. It's less time efficient, but it's totally worth it. Finally, you want to train functional movement patterns like squatting, hinging, lunging, things of that nature. So you can kind of get that benefit that transfers over specifically to your everyday life. We will be going over 5 types of core stability themes, including anti-extension, anti-flexion, hip hinge, anti-rotation, anti-side bending, single leg stability, and I'll also do a little bit of a bonus one of full body incorporation. I'm going to be minimizing the PowerPoint, but the PowerPoint will have pictures of all these exercises, so it'll be easy for you to return to the PowerPoint later to quickly remember them rather than having to rewatch this entire presentation. So as you'll see, I got pictures all the way right here. Okay, I'm going to minimize this window. I'm going to head to the back room so we can have a little bit more room. You can follow along with me if you'd like. I'm just going to be taking you through the exercises. I'll kind of explain why they're important and what they do, and then also some cues and how to do it or do each exercise perfectly. All right, so bear with me here. All right, let me get set up in here, and then I'll switch the screens so that you could see me full time, real time. This is gonna be awkward here. Okay, beautiful. All right, let's stop screen sharing here. Okay, hopefully you can see me as the main picture here. Let me double check, I'm not so great with Zoom. Okay, sweet. So, the first exercise is known as the dead bug. You guys might have done this before. It's a pretty common exercise in the fitness community, and I mean online. I see it often in Instagram videos, things of that nature. So what you do, double check that you can see here. So you're gonna lie on your back, first thing, just like this. You're gonna get yourself into a 90-90 position. So what that means is you're gonna go legs up in a 90-degree angle, hips at a 90-degree angle there. Next thing that you're going to do is I want you to focus on taking the small of your low back and driving it down into the ground. What you'll notice is your core actually kind of turns on and activates when you do that. That's a huge part of this exercise, and I want you to try to maintain that, pushing down into the ground the whole time. And you'll feel, like I said, you'll feel your core. So what you're going to do is you're going to go arms up, just like this. You're going to take your opposite arm and opposite leg, and you're going to extend both of them at the same time. So it's going to look something like this. Boom. Boom. Coming up just like that. The key to this exercise is as you do this, you want to maintain that position of your low back pushing down into the ground. Because that's going to train that core stability that we were talking about. So again, it looks like here, here, and I'm not letting my spine, I don't know if you can see that, I'm not letting space come out from under my low back as I let my leg down. Also, when you come overhead with your arm, you want to make sure that your ribs don't flare upwards like that. So again, I'm going to do one more time here. Here, and here. All right. So I forgot to mention, this exercise is an anti-extension exercise. So what that means is that it's preventing any excess motion of extension, which is this way. A lot of people end up overextending their lower back, like the runner that I was talking about in that that earlier example. This would be a great exercise for that person. I'm going to give you one other anti-extension exercise, which I think pretty much everyone has heard, but it's botched all the time. So that is called the front plank. So let's go over that. So front plank position, you're going to be going down on your elbows and your forearms right here, right? The goal of this exercise, the reason why it's called a plank, is you want to be in a perfectly straight line, meaning your head, your shoulders, your hips, knees, everything should be as straight as possible. So let me demonstrate that. See, beautiful. So this is what a pretty good plank. I wouldn't say perfect, because I'm sure some people would say it's not. The reason why, or two common compensations that you'll see are, you'll sag down, which defeats the purpose of the exercise because it's actually an anti-extension exercise. So you gotta make sure that you're upright like this, and you're not just letting your pelvis sag to the ground. You'll feel it more in your core if you're in this proper alignment. Another common thing that you'll see is people will fall up into this position, which also isn't really gonna work your core as much. And you'll feel it. So, I mean, when people are towards the last few seconds of their plank, it's normal to have that, but you really want to strive for that perfect form. One last comment I'll make about that. We talked about a muscle in our shoulder blades called the serratus anterior. It's important to also focus on your upper half when you're doing the plank. So, you want to make sure that your spine up here isn't just sagging down into the ground like this. You want to push away from the ground as much as you can. Kind of like you're rounding your spine almost, as you're pushing away. Because that serratus anterior helps drive your shoulder blades forward. And it's an important stabilizer of your shoulder, so it's important core muscle. Okay, let's go to the next exercise here. Now we're going to be working on anti-flexion. So let me make sure that I can see myself here. Anti-flexion essentially means that you are avoiding movement. Oh, this isn't good. There we go. You're avoiding flexing and slouching your spine going this way. Because a lot of issues can arise when you overflex your spine, especially when you're lifting, like disc injuries, muscle strains, ligament strains, things of that nature. So you want to be able to avoid that position to keep yourself in an upright, locked position. So I'm going to give you two exercises to address that. Let's get this going here. Hopefully you guys can like hear some aspects of it. I know it's kind of like reverb in here. My AirPods don't work with my computer because my computer's old, fortunately. So I'll try to talk loud and enunciate as much as I possibly can here for you. So I apologize for that. So going back to the flexion, anti-flexion, we're gonna work on doing what's called a hip hinge, or I mean a hip thrust. So go ahead and find a couch, coffee table, something that's stable that you could put your back on and it doesn't hurt too much. So what it looks like, at least the starting position, is this. You're gonna put the end of the corner of the box about the bottom of your shoulder blades, or like right in the middle of your mid-back. So right there. Next thing that you're gonna do is you're gonna make sure that your ears, your shoulders, and your hips are always in alignment. You never wanna come off of that. The whole entire exercise seems simple, but can be botched, is driving your butt straight up in the air, using your glute muscles as we talked about, that glute max. This is gonna work that muscle. So what it looks like is you're driving yourself up and back down. When you drive yourself up, you wanna make sure that you're squeezing your glute muscles, kind of like you're trying to squeeze a piece of paper or a penny between your cheeks. That can sometimes be a good cue to get people to activate the right muscles that we want. So let me demonstrate it one more time. Boom, coming down. Notice, like I said, my ears always stay in line with my shoulders and my hips. A lot of people that we see in the clinic will end up doing what's this. So they'll go like this, and they're gonna keep their head on the box as they come down, and that defeats the purpose of the exercise. So you're not training core stability if you're going up and then back down like this. So as a reminder, this is a good repetition right here. Boom, coming down just like that. Okay, that is the hip thrust. We're gonna go over one other anti-flexion exercise. How are we gonna get this situated? Okay, I think that's pretty solid right here. Okay. So the hip hinge is also an anti-flexion exercise. So what it's gonna look like, and we do this every single day, it's a very functional movement pattern. So it's anybody that has back pain, anybody that has hip pain and knee pain should be experts at this movement. So what it looks like, we're gonna start without weight, is you're gonna be in an upright position here. And all you're doing, I don't like this. All you're doing is driving your hips back, but the whole reason you're doing that is to try to keep your spine straight. So what it looks like is coming forward, just like this, coming back upright. You gotta make sure, like I said, that you're not falling forward and flexing at the spine. This is not a good rep right here. This is not keeping your core stable. It's not using the muscles that you should be using, your glute muscles, and we're ending up just putting way too much stress on the back. So again, what it looks like is driving the hips back, coming back up, just like that. If you have really good form and you see a PT or you see a fitness professional, then you can definitely load this movement. Which I'll show you right now with a kettlebell. At home, I know not everybody has kettlebells, not everybody has weights. What you could do instead is just take a backpack and then just throw whatever you can find at home, like heavier objects, and then you could use that as your weight, because all you need is essentially just a little bit of a handle, a little bit of grip to make it work. So it's a little bit of a life hack there. So I'm going to use this kettlebell for the purpose of this demonstration here. So, a thing to add, now when you have the weight's going to make the movement harder, obviously, but it's also going to make you want to slump forward from your upper half. So you actually have to use some of those other arm muscles that I was talking about that are actually really considered part of the core, specifically the latissimus dorsi. So I'm going to show you a bad repetition first of a bad upper body posture, and then we'll show you a good one. So coming here, this is a bad, rounding forward, I'm letting my arms slump forward, and I'm not engaging my lats whatsoever here. And then I'm coming up. What you should be doing is you should try to almost like pull your shoulder blades back towards your spine, because that's going to engage those lats and engage a little bit more of your core. So what a good repetition would look like is if you come forward, notice that I'm not slumping, the arms are staying locked into my body, and then coming upright just like that. Like I said, this is a super important movement. Even if you're not going to load it, it's a super important movement to master going forward for everything that you do in life. You hinge hundreds of times per day. Okay. Next, let's go to anti-rotation. So that essentially means your core needs to be able to resist movements that rotate your spine. Too much rotation can also cause disc injuries. It can cause too much stress to some of the joints in your low back, all things that we want to avoid. So there's some simple exercises that we can do to address this. So let me show you the first one right here. It's called a Palloff press, and we do it all the time in the clinic. Okay, so what you do need for this exercise, it's something you need a little bit of, you need either a resistance band, or you could use like a pulley at a gym. I don't know, obviously people aren't going to gyms as much, but if you do, you can use one of those pulley systems to make this one work. I'll also show you another anti-rotation, so if you don't have this, this stuff, then you're still good to go. Okay, so let me show you this. So you go into a half kneeling position, just like this. If you have problems with your knees, you can stand for this exercise, but it makes it harder, to be quite honest with you. So you can throw a pillow under your knee, maybe that will help. Anyways, for those that don't have that issue, here's the exercise. So what we're going to do is you grab a pulley or a band, and you're bringing it straight out in front of you. This band right now wants to rotate me back right here. It's giving me a pull to rotate my body towards the wall, towards where it came from. So our core has to work to counteract that movement. So what you do for this exercise is you're simply taking your fist, you're keeping it centered in the very center of your body right here, and you're just going in and out. So one, the starting position is holding it close to your chest, and then all you're going to do is press forward, making sure that you don't rotate this way. So a perfect repetition is going to look like this. It seems like a really silly and simple movement, but if you put the right amount of weight, like you'll feel it for sure. Just like that. Okay. Flying through here. Another anti-rotation exercise is something that you guys probably have done before if you have lifted or been a little bit more active throughout your life. It's called a bent over row. It's often seen like primarily as a shoulder exercise, which it is, shoulder and back exercise, but it also works what I call the core. So what you do, you find a little bit of like a surface or a bench to lean over, and you hinge at the hips, similar to what I was just talking about with that hip hinge pattern. Like I said, it's a functional movement and it always comes up. So here it is coming up again. So what you could do is you could put your arm down. I don't know if you guys can see, but my arm, this arm, is resting on a box, so it's not as hard for my core. Again, you can take a weight, you could take a backpack full of random stuff that can, I don't know, be some weight that's appropriate for you. You can just get creative with it. Anyways, so what you could do, or what you're supposed to do, is this. It looks pretty simple, but we'll break it down. So here's the row, and you're coming back down, just like this. This weight is gonna wanna rotate me as I'm bringing it down, and you gotta use your core to make sure that your shoulders stay square to the ground, just like this. So this one's actually almost like a combination of some of the movements that I was talking about. It's also an anti-flexion movement, like I was talking about, because it's preventing you from, you don't want to be in this position. So it's going to hit two birds with one stone. It's working a lot on that lat muscle right through here that I talked about, that attaches not only to your shoulder, but also attaches down to your low back. So that's a great one. Next one we'll do is a side plank. So a side plank is actually what's known as an anti-side bending exercise. It requires you to stay upright here. Your body's gonna wanna tilt, but you have to resist that. So what we're gonna do, I'll get to your questions at the end here because of that technical difficulty, we're running a little slim, but I see it. Okay, so with the side plank, what you're doing, obviously getting on your side. Most people, when they do side planks, do it on their forearm here. Same with the front plank. The concept is to keep your head in alignment with your shoulders, hips, knees, and ankles. Everything should be in alignment. I like to do a little bit of a variation here, so you might have not seen this one. There's many ways to do it, but here's what I do. So I do one leg straight out, and this bottom leg bent. So what it looks like is up like this. What it requires is this part of your core needs to drive your body upright in order to make sure that you stay in this nice straight plane, just like this. Seems simple, but it can get fatiguing. Also, it's working the muscle on the side of your hip, right here, that gluteus medius. You remember the runner that had that curving spine and that sagging pelvis? It's working on that muscle so you can avoid that while you're running. So this is a great exercise for the runners. So you're here. You also want to make sure that your hips are extended fully. You're not sagging back into flexion here. You're pushing your hips forward, and everything is nice and aligned. Holding it for however long you can, doing it three times or so on each side. All right, flying through this here. Like I said, PowerPoint will have everything on it. This one is called the suitcase carry. So it's another anti-side bending exercise that makes you stay upright. So all you would do is grab a heavier weight, because this one you can do You can use a heavier weight than you can with many other exercises for this one, because all you're doing is you're holding the weight at your side. So you can, like I said, grab a backpack, grab a heavy dumbbell, grab kettlebell, something like this. I'm gonna grab a light one because, you know, I'm dying over here. So what the exercise is simply, way simpler than you think, is holding your weight on one side of your body, just like this. This weight is gonna wanna pull me to the side, just based on physics. It's gonna wanna yank me this way. And I have to use my core to drive this muscle, drive my trunk and stay upright. So you'll feel it mostly on the opposite side of whatever weight, whatever hand that you're holding it in. So you're not just gonna, I mean, you could technically stand here, but it's a little bit more effective to do it while you're walking. So this is what it's gonna look like here. Staying perfectly upright, just like this. Making sure that I'm not side bending or sagging to the side, just like that. You're keeping yourself nice and upright, kind of like a soldier, a little stick figure, gliding across the air. This is a great one, very functional. I mean, it transfers to so many different things when you're moving, when you're bringing groceries in. There's this, it's countless how many functional transferability that one comes. So I think I got one more anti-side bending. I'm throwing a ton at you here. So hopefully you're following. Last anti-side bending is gonna incorporate our arms a little bit more. So it's the same exact thing as the suitcase carry, except it's just gonna be a slightly different position. Instead, you're gonna take the weight, kettlebell, dumbbell, whatever you have, and we're gonna be locking our arm over our head, making sure that our elbows are stacked over our shoulders, so everything is nice in alignment. A lot of people are gonna do one of these guys. You gotta lock it out. It's gonna work some of those muscles in the back of your shoulder blade, like the lower trapezius that I was talking about, which is very important for your shoulder health and your core health. So all you have to do, take that weight, and you're gonna be walking up and down in a straight line, making sure that you don't sag towards the side that the weight is. So it's gonna look like this. Can seem simple, but it actually can be pretty hard, and it might be a little bit complex for some. So give that one a try, see if it feels good. And yeah, so moving on. I got one last bonus question, or bonus exercise. So this exercise is more incorporating what I was talking about with the core, how it can transfer kind of momentum from your lower body to your upper body, like with shoveling. This is an exercise that can work on that. It's a little bit more advanced because there's a lot of moving parts, so I wouldn't do this for everybody. I wouldn't do this for a lot of patients, but if you were a little bit higher level, it's a fantastic full body core exercise that gets pretty much all the muscles that I mentioned in the PowerPoint. So what it is a squat to an overhead press. So I'm gonna go ahead and show a few reps that are done well, and then we'll go over some compensations, then we'll wrap up this PowerPoint, all right? So I'm gonna show some good repetitions here. What Dave would say, these would be crappy repetitions, but I'll give it my best shot here. So you're holding the weight in this front arm, letting it rest on your shoulder right here. We're squatting down, driving up, arm overhead, locking off that weight, just like that. I'm going to show it one more time. Here, drive up. Weights overhead. Form is money. This is also good for anybody that's doing any sort of athletic performance. This is a fantastic exercise. Just a few things that I want you to pay attention to, specifically in your core, is making sure that you're not overextending. It's very common to see that, which I'll explain in a second. You want to make sure, like I've talked about before, that everything is in alignment. So what I'm talking about is when you're overhead here, your wrists, your elbows, shoulder, ears, hips, everything should be locked out perfectly on the side. So I'll show you a couple bad reps that I was talking about with that overextension of the back. So here, and then, I don't know if you can see, I'm getting this excessive extension throughout my core, which is, you do not want that at all. You want to make sure that your core is tucked downwards. So a good cue that you could use is you want to make sure that you keep your ribs tucked down as you press the weight over your head. I don't want you to slouch, but if you have that cue, it kind of prevents that overarching that is super common and will wreck what you're trying to do. So again, here's a good repetition. I'll show it from this angle here. Squatting down, shooting up. Overhead. Rest the weight. Boom, boom. All right. I'm tired. You guys are tired. Let's wrap up this PowerPoint here. Let me share my screen again here. So after all this information, you can see it's pretty complex. The core is very complex, but it's also extremely important. That's why physical therapists can help. I know we all have our own professions and we focus on this specifically so we can really help you. So you can learn all these muscles and functions, but identifying which ones you need to address individually should be done with a PT. And it's something that we do all the time. That way you can customize your specific training needs to meet either what you're trying to accomplish athletically, what you're trying to accomplish from injury prevention, what you're trying to accomplish from decreasing pain. We can just help you. It's not only with the core strength, but it's also the motor control of that. All right. So before we get to questions, I wanted to remind everyone about direct access physical therapy. This means that you no longer need a script from a doctor to start physical therapy, which is awesome because that used to be the case. I also wanted to mention that we are definitely still open during all this COVID craziness. We're offering both in-person visits as well as virtual visits if you do not feel as comfortable coming to the clinic. However, the Lincoln Park location is huge, and there's only about 2 therapists working here. So it's pretty easy to space everybody out appropriately, and we always do that. We're always cleaning. Everybody's wearing a mask. I'm currently not because no one is. I'm in this room by myself, and it allows you guys to hear me a little bit better. But anyways, it's a great option if you feel like you're struggling with a little bit of that core stability. We can really help you. So thanks to everyone for coming to the webinar. I know I gave you guys a ton of information because that's just in my nature. I'm a very technical person. Again, you can revisit both the webinar video and the PowerPoint itself, which can be downloaded in the blog aspect of our website. And I believe the video is actually being sent to you automatically when I end this webinar. Hopefully you were able to get something out of the PowerPoint. I know it's pretty intense, but I appreciate you listening to me blabble for an hour here, and sorry for the technical difficulties there, but we got through it. So let's take a look at the chat. What could be clinical indications for anti-rotation WRT symptoms? Or will the prescription be based on the patient's ADL activities, meaning the activities of daily living, or aggravating moments? That's a good question. I would say, yes, I think you're right. I think it is a lot based on what the person specifically is having to do in their daily life. What they're, like I was talking about before, like, are they doing a sporting activity? But also, like, we watch you move throughout PT, and we can notice deficits in that regard. Like when we're doing exercise, we'll notice it. We don't have to specifically do an anti-rotation exercise to notice that you have an anti-rotation core stability issue. But a lot has to do with, like you said, the specific activities that they're doing, and also like what the pain and presentation that they have, that dictates a lot. Essentially, anybody that has back pain can really benefit from anti-rotation exercises. Okay. With respect to, okay. All right, does anybody have any other questions? Again, I'm sorry for the sound. I know it was bad. Hopefully you were able to hear it enough to get something out of it. Again, you can look at the presentation, which has a lot of information in it. So I'll stick around for the next few minutes here. If anybody else has any other questions, send them to the chat, and then we'll get out of here and let you get out of here. Thank you to everybody. You're welcome. Yeah, sure. Let me show you the pictures of each exercise. So going through, you could see that I label it at the top for what specific type of core stability that you're going after. And then also pictures, like, to try to give you an idea of the movement and what I think is pretty good form that you can try to mirror. Going through here, I'll go through it one more time. Here's anti-extension, anti-flexion and hip hinge, anti-rotation, anti-side bend, and the full body transfer. Hopefully that was helpful, Rosalind. All right, I'll give you guys one last call here for questions. If not, we're gonna let you guys go. All right, thanks again, everybody. Hope you have a great rest of your week here, and thanks for coming.